Okay, welcome everyone to another edition of Spilling the Tea, where we sit down and talk with alums about their life after Earlham and everything that they've been doing since the graduation. Thank you all for coming, and thank you all for tuning in who were not able to come to the live event but are viewing this later on YouTube or through the CGCE website. So glad to have you. Today we will be interviewing Chrissy Sollenberger, Lisa Castaneda, and Susan Littleton. Thank you so much again for agreeing to talk with me today about life after Earlham. So, how this will go down today is we'll start in typical Earlham fashion. We'll start with a moment of stillness to kind of get our minds centered and all of that. And then I'll do some brief housekeeping notes, and then I'll go into the introduction of our three interviewees, followed by 30-minute to 40-minute Q&A. So let's go ahead with that moment of stillness. Okay, so brief housekeeping. If you are new to spilling the tea while you're viewing this at home, make sure to check out the CGCE website where you can see the videos of past spilling the tea alums, and you can also find other career advice as well. We also have the spilling teas recorded and uploaded to YouTube. And for those of you who have not already, please consider signing up for ecconnect, whether you're an alum or a current student. ecconnect is a platform where students and alums can connect with each other through their industries of interest or their career communities. It's a great way for students to connect with people who have been there and have experienced what you're going through already before. And there are currently over 500 alums waiting to connect with students. So I'm so excited about that. As a career coach, students are always asking me, I want to speak with alums. I want to speak with alums. So here's a platform for students to be able to do that. Okay, so for introductions, we'll get right into it. I'll start with Lisa. Lisa Castaneda graduated from Earlham College in 2005 with a major in economics. Soon after, she pursued a master's degree in international trade policy at the Monterey Institute of International Studies in California, where she had the opportunity to do a 6-month internship at the United Nations in Geneva, Switzerland. Her professional career over the past decade has been focused on analytics and insights, from financial journalism to customers insights, and now as a manager of sales insights at LinkedIn. She currently lives and works in San Francisco, California. Susan Littleton, class of 2005, is a registered nurse and certified nurse midwife who resides in Columbus, Ohio. Following graduation from Earlham College in 2005 with a major in politics and a minor in journalism, Susan decided to move into healthcare. She earned a diploma in nursing from Christ College of Nursing and Health Sciences and subsequently worked as an RN in a pediatric hospital. She then obtained a master's of science in nursing from Ohio State University, becoming a certified nurse midwife. She is passionate about equity in healthcare and spent her career as a midwife working in federally qualified health centers in urban areas throughout Ohio. Promoting and supporting breastfeeding was a central component of her work, and she now provides volunteer breastfeeding support as a La Leche League Leader while staying home and homeschooling her 2 children. Chrissy Sollenberger is a program officer with the Walton Family Office, a family-led organization supporting multiple generations of Sam and Helen Walton's family. Since graduating Earlham College with a BA in Sociology, Anthropology, or SOAN as we like to call it, she has served in various positions across philanthropy and nonprofits spanning local, national, and international areas of social enterprises, impact investing, immigration reform, and gerontology. Chrissy's work experience is enhanced by a graduate certificate in nonprofit capacity building from Regis University in Denver, Colorado. So once again, thank you so much, Susan, Chrissy, and Lisa. So excited to talk to all of you about, where life has taken you after graduation. Thank you again. So as for the questions, my first question is, unfortunately this year, because of the impacts of COVID, we've had very limited in-person activities, actually none really at all. Usually around this time, we would be doing the Alumni Connection Social, where students get to talk with alums about, what life has to bring them after graduation and things they had to look forward to, whether it be jobs or graduate school. So I'm glad that we were able to do this instead and not just, let things go. But the first question I have for you all that a senior may want to know is, did you all know that you would be doing what you would be doing, what you're doing now when you graduated? And I'll let you all answer in whichever order you would like.
I can start. Thanks for the question. And I think the answer to that question for anyone 15 years after graduating is absolutely not. You would never know that you, like what I'm doing right now, I would have no idea that I would be doing that after graduation. I majored in economics and I wasn't ready for the workforce, honestly. I'm originally from Bogota, Colombia, so I feel like I wasn't fully assimilated. And so it sounds weird to say this, but I didn't feel American enough to jump into the labor market. So unprepared that I'm like, I just need to continue to be in academia for a little bit longer to understand what is it that I even want to do. And that's how I decided to apply for grad school. I knew that I didn't want to continue with economics in a master's or like PhD format, because that's very sort of like mathematical models and things that are not applied. So that's why I decided to get a degree in international trade politics, because the context, the socioeconomic context is what I wanted to do. So applied economics rather than physics, which is what an economics, like a PhD in economics would probably get you closer to. So no, the answer to that is no. I had no idea, and I'm glad that I stayed in academia for longer. Of course, the answer is different for everyone because we all come from different places, have different interests. But I was pretty clueless actually after college. I think it was very much a journey of discovery after that.
I could go next. So I'll echo Lisa's no. I did not know where I was going to end up. As you said, I was a politics and major and journalism minor. I stayed as far away from science courses as Earlham would let me. I took the absolute minimum. And I did my senior thesis in politics on health policy. We had to write a policy proposal, and I made mine on universal healthcare. So I had an interest in healthcare from that perspective, focusing on equity and the huge lack of universal healthcare in the United States. And in so doing, as I was researching all of these countries that had far better healthcare than the US, I started to think, I don't really know what healthcare is like in the United States. If I want to go towards health policy, I want to know what it's like. And I had an inkling that RNs had a really good ear to the ground on what healthcare is really like. And so I decided, okay, I'll pursue an RN degree and then I'll move into health policy. I was still strongly focused on politics and writing. And I encountered nurse midwifery on an off chance. I happened to be on a clinical rotation when a nurse midwife was catching a baby, and I walked in the room and I fell in love. And I couldn't go straight into a midwifery program coming out of nursing. I needed to take a job. And the only rotation really that I didn't, the only one that spoke to me at all was pediatrics. I'd always loved kids. So I went ahead and took a job in pediatrics and applied to midwifery programs. I still thought for a long time that I would circle back to that writing and policy piece. And I never did. I found that my niche was definitely the working with people and being of service in that way. So as you said, I'm not actually practicing professionally now. I'm just putting my skills to use in a volunteer capacity for the time being. But no, I didn't know where I was ending up, and we've all come out in different places.
Thank you. What about you, Chrissy?
Yeah, so similar to Susan and Lisa, I think I was a couple weeks away from graduation and really had no idea what I was going to do next. And I walked into the career services department at Earlham, and I had a conversation with someone that had encouraged me to look into the Peace Corps or AmeriCorps. And so I think I knew at that point that I wanted to do something that had meaning. And I think the value of service was really encouraged at Earlham. So I looked at AmeriCorps Vista, and a little bit dissimilar to the Peace Corps, you can review all of the sites that are available and choose based on a subject that is of interest to you. When I was at Earlham, I had studied abroad in Cuautla, Mexico, and I had worked as an internship in a senior citizen community center. So I was really interested in the distinction of how senior citizens are cared for um, and are kind of oriented in a community in Mexico versus the United States. So I chose an AmeriCorps Vista site that was working with low-income seniors in Boulder, Colorado. Other than that, I have no idea how I ended up here. And it was just a great opportunity to gain skills and kind of apply some of my interests in a way that gave me confidence in a local nonprofit. So I really did not know that I would be working in the nonprofit world, but I think that by kind of circumstance, a lot of different conversations and values of the Earlham community kind of led me to where I am now.
Thank you. Thank you. It's really encouraging, I think, for some of the students to hear that, because I hear a lot of students right now, they're in panic mode because it's the end of a chapter, and there's a lot of uncertainty that comes with that. And just knowing, I as a career coach can tell them, you're going to be okay. Just go with the flow, or whatever advice pertains to that specific student. But it's reassuring for them to know, like, people who have been in the work field, in the work industry, didn't have it all figured out when they graduated. Can you all can someone, all of you, or can someone kind of speak to that process of how you, like, summarize it, how you found that next step after graduation?
I guess just to add to what I had mentioned, I think a lot of the different conversations that I had with people led me to feeling good about that next step. And I think that, you know, being in Richmond, Indiana for college, I didn't really understand. I wasn't connected to alumni. I didn't understand what opportunities were available, and even like where a sociology, anthropology degree would be applied.
Mhm.
And so I think starting with having conversations and exploring that with professors, with people in the community through internships, through, you know, alumni is such a good first step, because no one is going to have that one answer for you, but they're going to have what worked for them, like this conversation. And it's an opportunity to kind of imagine yourself in that role, whether it's someone who's 5 years out of college or someone that's retired and had success in a fulfilling career.
Yeah, I think, well, I'll repeat a little bit of what I said, which is I didn't feel like I was ready to get a job back then. Something that I didn't do that I wish I had done more is ask more questions and get more perspective. I just felt like I had to do it on my own, and I had to like this huge weight on my shoulders. And I thought, you know, the next step that I take is going to define my life forever, which is not true at all. But that's how I felt at that moment. So I wish that I had just asked more people for help, because I now, being the age that I am, I know that people would love to have helped me. And of course, now we have all these different platforms. Like, I'm not selling LinkedIn because I'm there, but working there. But you know, there's just so many networks and so many social platforms that students can use today. Very different world, but regardless, I think that I wish I had asked more questions and ask for help.
Susan, did you have anything to add?
I don't think I have anything to add that hasn't been said to answer that one.
No worries. So talking to more, so what I gathered from what Chrissy and Lisa said was talking to more people and really reaching out, and having conversations with different types of people. So what about that advice that you would tell a student who's graduating? You know, they got through their major, but it may have been something they found out that they aren't, you know, completely in love with as much as they thought they would be. Don't necessarily want to pursue that. How do you, what, as three individuals who all went into very different fields than what they majored in, Chrissy, not as much as everyone else, what advice would you give students who are like, I want to go into something completely different?
The first thing I would say is don't be afraid to try something completely different. For me, it was a really, really big, scary departure. Like I said, I am not a science person, but I took what I got from Earlham, which was a little more confidence and a willingness to put myself out there a little bit more. And recognizing that Earlham is not direct training for any career. It isn't meant to be. The benefit of a liberal arts education is going to provide you with these skills that are going to make you better at any career. So the reason we take all these different courses in liberal arts is to get an exposure and to learn about the entire world. The major and minor are a relatively small part compared to if you go to a school that is a trade school where that's all you're learning. Take the knowledge, the skills, the passion you developed at Earlham and be willing to apply it to anything. And I think you'll be successful.
Thank you, Susan.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that, Ebony. I would say that even, you know, I have friends who are in their 40s today and they're changing careers. They're going to law school. So it's never, first of all, when you're out of college and again, so young, right? 21, 22, 23, is the time to take risks, is the time to completely pivot and experiment and just discover. Like I guess the main advice that I would give is like, just be curious. If you're not passionate about what you just did at Earlham, it doesn't matter. Just like, what are you passionate and curious about, and go for that. Whether that is, you know, continuing with grad school, or maybe look for an internship that's closer to what they want to do, and see if maybe after that internship, they want to find a job or go to grad school again. But to not be afraid, like Susan said, just take risks, because that's the time to do it. And really, it's never too late to take risks, right? So that's what I would say there.
This advice really helps me as well. It seems with the introduction of social media into our everyday lives, I especially feel it with my students that it feels like a rat race, kind of. You're on a race to, be successful, but it's really reassuring that, you have time, you can change your mind. It's not a race. You have to focus on yourself and not necessarily the person in the lanes next to you. So thank you. I think that's some very valuable advice to give. This question actually comes from one of our students, Kendra Parker. She asked, some of you are in positions you didn't necessarily plan to be in. How do you navigate the transition between this is what I want to do to this is what I'm meant to do, or this is where I can be impactful now? That was a very loaded question. And I just wanted to ask that because it's a good one.
I think something that comes to mind for me is that, navigating the transition of this is what I want to do to maybe this is what I'm meant to do, is that similar to what's been said already, like being curious and finding things that you're passionate about isn't always about finding a full-time job. And I think now what I'm seeing is that a lot of experience when I'm reviewing resumes of candidates is things that they're passionate about that aren't necessarily their last job.
Mm-hmm.
It might be that they're really passionate about, a volunteer opportunity that they have, or learning how to bake sourdough bread, or figuring out how to build an app that's very, very early stage. And so as much as you can kind of explore those things that I think build up to be a more interesting resume than just a traditional resume of I was here for 3 years and then I was at the next job for 3 years. I think that's really going to help you to figure out what it is that you are passionate about, and also give you that experience that helps you determine what you're meant to do, or where you can be impactful.
Thanks. Thank you, Chrissy.
I found it helpful for me along the way because when you come out of an RN program, there's not much of any availability of jobs besides going to pediatric or adult medical surgical nursing, going to work on an inpatient unit. And I found it was much more emotionally taxing for me than I ever would have imagined. I knew I was working with critically ill patients. I didn't have a sense for my inability to leave things at work. I could never leave the pain of what they were going through at work, and I worried every night as I laid in bed. But I found it was critical for me to learn that of myself, and I am ever thankful for the experience of finding what worked for me and what didn't, and that I could do good in that job, and it could be the right place for right now, while also opening my eyes to needing to move in a direction where I could do good without being in so much pain that I was drawn down into a place where I wasn't able to do any more good. So accepting that this can be the right place for right now, but also using that experience to go forward and find something that fits you better.
Yeah, what I would say there is after my master's degree in international trade policy, I didn't move into the World Trade Organization, right? And I didn't become an economist, which is what I thought maybe I was going to do after getting a master's degree in that. But I also learned when I was in the UN that I didn't want to be in the UN. It wasn't for me. It was too bureaucratic. It was just full of red tape, and I just felt like the impact that I was going to be able to make there was not necessarily what I was looking for. So just going through that experience will teach you what you can do with those skills and what you don't want to do, which is equally important, right? Like, so I knew what I didn't want to do after going through that program, and I don't regret any of it. I feel like sometimes when you say like, I'm not an economist today, and like, then why did I get that degree? It was very expensive. And actually just last year I finished my loan payments, which is great. But it took me to California. It's about like the life experience too, right? So it took me to California. This is where I met my husband. This is where I was also able to work in Switzerland, Geneva. So it doesn't necessarily have to translate into what you do after you graduate. One thing though that I did learn from my graduate program is that I love insights and data. And I think that's where the connection between economics, which is critical thinking, like trying to understand the world through the lens of economics, is really working with data. And I'm passionate about data. So I don't think it's not fair to say that it's not connected to what I study, because it's always connected one way or another. And that passion for like data and insights is what has kind of been the underlying theme in my entire career.
Right. Sometimes I tell students, we encourage you to have internships and experiences outside of Earlham, because it's just as beneficial for students, if not more, to find out this is not what I want to do. I do not like this. Because if you can stop yourself while you're ahead of the game, that's a lot of money that you end up saving going, into something that you are not passionate about. So again, reassuring storytelling. Thank you so much. Another question from Kendra is, many times lack of experience can make it hard to penetrate our industries of interest. How did you find opportunities that provided leverage in your industries?
It is very competitive, I would say, especially so now I do have to review a lot of resumes, and I'm hiring for 2 roles right now. I would say that right after grad school, in my experience, or college, internships would be great to highlight, or the skills that you got through coursework. Or back to what Chrissy was saying, I think highlighting what makes you unique beyond the curriculum, beyond the skills that you get through like a class, right, is what you can show the passion that you have. I mean, first of all, when you're out of school, as a hiring manager, right, I know where people are at that stage, and we want to give them a shot. We understand that they don't have experience because they're just out of school. So we want to understand, do they have what it takes to learn the job? Not necessarily that they have the experience, but do they have the traits of personality, the courage that this job will require? So it's not so much about the experience per se, but how they come across in the interview. So I would say, like, for those interviews, just prepare and over prepare, because the person who comes across as confident, it's not what you did, what you studied, is what you say and how you show up, I would say. So I think like preparing for those things is critical. And of course, the skills that translate well for the job that they're applying to should be reflected in some capacity. But the most important thing is how they're going to come across in an interview, especially right out of college. Once you have experience, the interviewing process changes. But right out of college, hiring managers are very forgiving.
So what I'm hearing from that is to go ahead and shoot for those jobs that maybe you don't have all of the qualifications for.
Yes.
A lot of
yes.
students are very apprehensive in applying. Oh, I don't have that one skill. And it's like, oh, well, if they say no, that's the worst thing that can happen. Is that so bad?
No, so I write job descriptions, and I always ask for 4+ years of experience. But if someone comes with 2 years of experience and they're really qualified, I'll take them. So job descriptions are a like guideline for hiring managers, right? It's not necessarily what exactly that they have to fit and check every box. It's just more to attract the right talent, but they don't have to check every box that we have in that job description.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And I think, just to add to that, having the confidence that you can figure it out is so important. And I felt very underprepared, or maybe underqualified, for every job I've ever had. But I've often described when in the past I have been unprepared and I've figured it out. And so I think that's one way of framing kind of what Lisa's describing of applying for a job where you might feel like you don't have all the experience, but you can demonstrate that you've been curious in the past, you've figured it out when you haven't necessarily had that experience. And then to the point about opportunities that provided leverage in your industries, I think showing up is really important, whether it's asking someone to get coffee or, for me, it was a small community. So I moved to Boulder, Colorado. I was in the nonprofit field and I was just an AmeriCorps Vista member. But I asked a lot of executive directors and fundraisers and development directors, even like local government officials. I remember randomly reaching out to someone on city council and just saying, like, I want to better understand this community in the nonprofit world and local government. Can I buy you a coffee? And I think that those different opportunities of reaching out and having the confidence to show up and ask questions really benefited me in the long run in terms of gaining leverage.
So my experience in nursing and midwifery, actually, maybe this is a plug for if you're considering a different career. It's not hard to get a job as a nurse. There's still always a shortage in almost every market nationwide. Advanced practice nursing is getting a little crowded for people, family nurse practitioners and that sort of thing. So all of the things that Chrissy and Lisa are saying are going to apply. Midwifery is really, really growing. It's way easier to get a job as a midwife now than it was when I graduated. There was one practice in Columbus, Ohio that hired them when I graduated, and now there are about 10. So it's a growing field and it's a place to move if you're considering healthcare but are worried about not being able to get a job. Also, I will add, make sure you send a thank you note if you did get an interview, because I think that makes a huge difference in being hired.
And I just want to say that me deciding where I gave birth was highly dependent upon the support that I had, especially with, as an African American woman, with, the data that is now available to everyone about, everything that can go wrong in birth. So for anyone who may be watching this, you hear it now from a midwife and also from someone who's given birth. Like, I think there are a lot more people like me who are looking for that extra support in the delivery room. Okay, that's all. So how have you identified your transferable skills that have helped you fit into that current role?
Well, I think Susan's comments about liberal arts degree, I really agree with. I think it gives you a framework to approach problems, no matter what industry that's in. I think for me, with a SOAN degree, I was really attuned to the dynamics, like the power dynamics that are present in any institution, whether that's local government, nonprofit, or industries. And so I think I took that into the work that I was doing and looked at the nonprofit field and said, it doesn't, if you're working with kids, if you're working with seniors, there's a dynamic here around fundraising and the power of money to amplify the amount of work and good that you can do in your community. And it motivated me to be able to gain skills in fundraising, even though that's not the immediate kind of thing you think about when you think about SOAN and making an impact. For me, it was really important to gain those skills and be able to advance any nonprofit that I was working in. And so just in thinking about, kind of the power dynamics that are present in those institutions, I think it motivated me to look at how I could make the biggest impact.
So it's interesting because, again, I graduated in 2005. 16 years ago, which is even hard to say. And it's hard to remember really transferable skills right out of college. But I would say that one thing that Earlham gave me, and I think this probably is true across the board, is critical thinking. Hands down, is just critical thinking and communication, because everyone has to take humanities. Last time I checked, I don't know if that's still true, but I know okay, well, back then we all had to take humanities, which was the hardest class that I've ever taken, also because English is my second language. And that was one class that I remember vividly. I remember Western political philosophy, which was the most amazing class I've ever taken in my entire life. And it just taught me to think. And I love thinking through problems, through things, whether that's data or writing papers. And so I think that's the main transferable skill that I can still see from when I graduated from Earlham and what I'm doing right now. And so I think that communication is everything. Being able to communicate well across different audiences and bringing that sort of critical thinking to everything that you do is the most important thing I think you can do right after college, and something that I know Earlham equipped me with. Yeah.
Thank you, Lisa.
So critical thinking was going to be on my list, but I'm going to let Lisa's answer stand because I think that really applies across a variety of fields. The other one I would say is ability to listen to people and connect to people. Ebony, you really hit on it when you talked about the outcomes for Black women and other people of color in the United States healthcare. It's a travesty. And the global perspective that Earlham gave me on the world set me into a field where I can't claim to know what it's like to live as a Black woman in inner city Cleveland. I can't. But at least I can have an understanding of what I'm lacking so that I can be willing to listen to people and try and connect to them. And I know that by hearing people, getting them to open up and tell you what's going on, we can dramatically affect their outcomes. And I really picked those things up at Earlham, and it's only in looking back that I can really see how I honed those skills coming out of Earlham, because it was such a different career path, but it was still skills that are very, very relevant to my field.
So again, we've talked about a little bit how everyone has kind of deviated from what they graduated, majoring in from Earlham. Can you all speak to maybe if you've dealt with or how you dealt with maybe imposter syndrome, where you're like, I'm not supposed to be here. This is not this. I'm not like all the others. I'm not as smart as all of the others who majored in this, discipline that heavily aligns with this career path. Like, can any of you all speak to that?
I think I've definitely had that in a lot of the jobs that I've had. And I think drawing on those skills that are really unique about an Earlham education helped me to remove some of that imposter syndrome. So there are a lot of skills that other professionals, in the areas where I've worked don't have. Things like building community and listening and empathy. And I think I've been surprised sometimes that those things are lacking in someone that might have more of a narrow focused educational background. I also think there's the element of inclusion and bringing others along to your success that I felt like was a part of my Earlham education. It was a lot around working with others, and whether that was a research project or not having house parties where others weren't welcome, whatever it was. I just think there was an element of that has now benefited me in the work that I do, and that I'm really grateful for about my education.
I think the idea of the imposter syndrome is something that all of us will experience at some point or another. I have experienced that probably with every job that I've gotten. I think it's getting easier now because of one reason, because I'm more confident, because I know that I got the job because they believed in me and they believed in my potential. So I remind myself of that. Like if you got the job or if you got promoted, it's because a lot of people thought that you could do it. So I think reminding yourself of that is very important. And also that all you can do is your best, right? And the rest of it, you just have to let it go because you can't control the outcome of everything. So do your best at everything, whether your job is big or small, always do your best, be the best at your job. And that helps you gain that self-confidence. I think also just remembering that when you start a new job or when you get promoted or you get a new role, you don't know the job, you don't know what you're doing, so it's going to take time to learn it, and that's the expectation, right? We never like hire people thinking that they're going to know all the answers or start contributing right away. There's a ramp time, and just if you got the job, is because a lot of people believed in your potential, and that's how you can get over that imposter syndrome.
I'm not sure I've gotten over mine. I think it's something that just comes with age and experience, that the older I get, the less I care so much about competing with other people. And maybe I never really cared about competition. And that's one thing that really comes from Earlham, right? It is a collaborative environment. I view people as partners rather than as opponents. So I can remove that part from the situation of trying to get ahead of other people. But there's always a piece of me that's a little worried I'm not going to be good enough. And I think that's that's just getting better with age. I'm almost 40, and probably by 40 I'll be over it.
Good to know. Good to know. So I'm going to deviate from the questions a little bit. Do we have any students? Let me see in the participants. Well, I'll just open up questions to all who are here. Don't have to be students. So yeah, if you have questions, go ahead and chime in. I know I still have questions if no one else does.
I don't have questions, but I want to, if I can add a couple of things to what Susan and Lisa and Chrissy have said. One of the things I used to tell employees, I was at a Fortune 50 company for a number of years, hiring or in a position to, I wasn't hiring, I was the boss. And one of the things that when people ask me what was the most important characteristic one could bring to that, I said flexibility. Because you change, I mean, if you were good, you got to do all kinds of different things. And even if you weren't good, sometimes you had to do all kinds of different things. So the opportunity to embrace that and to embrace new change and just go with it. But being flexible. There was a period when the company I was working for was going through all kinds of problems. And I had 5 different jobs in 4 months. Because they said, we need you to do this, we need you to do this, we need you to do this. And that really paid off. So that's another skill that I think I learned. And part of it was believing that I could learn and figure out things. And I learned that at Earlham. Because I switched from English to biology and then did nothing with biology. So I would just throw that in. It's not a question, I realize.
No worries, no worries. Thank you.
I guess my question is, if you've ever faced rejection, and particularly a career side, and how you dealt with that.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
Yes, of course, a lot of times. Like, I was trying to move into management for a couple of years at LinkedIn, and I applied to, I don't know, probably like 4 different jobs, including product marketing, including like biz ops, and I got rejected right and left. I mean, like no, you don't qualify, and I'm like, okay, fine. But I mean, I kept trying because there's no, I still wanted to be a manager. I knew that I could do it. There wasn't any opportunity in my like team, but when it finally opened up and I applied, then yes, I got the opportunity. And I think that going through all of those rejections, which I don't really want to call it rejection, it's like practice, really. You're practicing, right? And with every interview and with every try, you just get better. You get more confident in your answers, which is why I think I finally got the job, is because I finally killed it in the interview. So I think instead of seeing it as rejection, I would just look at it as practice and experience.
Yeah, I've also experienced rejection, whether that was not getting a job I applied for or having a job not work out. And I think at the time it felt like it was all about me, and it was really a rejection of who I was. And I now look back on those experiences and realize that it would have led me in a way that I didn't want to go, or it was a team that probably wouldn't have been a good fit for me, or it was an organization that was just going through growing pains and it actually wasn't, had nothing to do with me. And so I think that, a lot of times the interview process can be what I think is unbalanced, where it feels like all the pressure is on the candidate and whether they're the perfect person for the role. I think that should be flipped across the board. I don't think that's going to happen, but I think one way of doing that is for you as a candidate to ask questions about whether this is the right opportunity for you and whether this organization is good enough for everything you're bringing to the job. And I wish I had done that a little bit more, because I think I wouldn't have taken those rejections as hard. But that would be my advice in, facing rejection.
Of course, I tell students when they are going through the interview process, of course, you need to do the research on the organization. But just a follow-up, Chrissy, how do you go about figuring out if that's the right organization for you to join?
I think that also comes with time and experience. I think one of those is knowing what you don't want to do, which was mentioned, and exploring that, whether that's through a job or conversations or internships. I also think asking those questions around values and thinking about that interview process as an opportunity for values alignment. So that can be asking questions of maybe it's understanding whether the company or the organization is doing work in their local community through volunteer or corporate social responsibility. It might be better understanding the work-life balance culture, whether that aligns with you. It might be understanding like how decisions are made on the team. What is a manager's culture and how they like to manage people and what kind of employees they like to hire. Just kind of getting at those deeper issues, I think, is one way of understanding whether it's a good fit for you.
Thank you. We have one question in the chat, but does anyone have anything to add to that? Okay, Jason wants to know, how do you plan for the future? Do you have annual goals? Do you have 5 to 10 year plans or goals?
No, I never have 5 to 10 year plans, because in my experience, I think that I do have 1 to 2 year plans, yes, but I think 5 years is so far out, and so many things can change, you know, personally and professionally, and the opportunities that may come up, you just don't know. And I also feel like if I shoot for 5 years, that I almost get sad, because then I kind of rob myself of the opportunity to be surprised. But like, what is it that I may be doing in 5 years, as opposed to I know exactly what I'm going to be doing in 5 years. That's just my personal philosophy. I still like to be surprised and kind of take things as they come. But I do try to have a 1 year plan in terms of like, okay, do I want to continue in this role? Do I want to maybe shoot for a promotion, or do I even want to change companies? And now as a manager, we have a lot of career conversations with our employees. And that's helping me a lot as well, because we work on like 1 year, like what is your vision for a year from now? For example, what does that look like? And how can I help you get there? And so that helps me to have my own 1 year plan. And how do I do that? I think there's a lot of self-coaching that people can do. There is, I mean, and now with Google, we can find those sheets or questionnaires everywhere, where like, what gives you energy, what's working in your current role, what's not working in your role, like, or if you're just completely bored and you want to completely do something different, and then that, just put it on paper, just write it down, write your thoughts down. And how do you see yourself in a year from now? And shoot for the stars, just be out there, because that's what you can visualize, you can manifest, right? So just start by writing it down. And then I do have sometimes, like when I work with my own manager, and like if I do want to get promoted, for example, which is totally hypothetical, then there are things that I can do, the projects that I work on, the people that I need to meet, who I need to network with. So then you have those tactical steps that you can take to manifest that plan.
I definitely don't have a 5 or 10 year plan I'm ever working towards. I once took a workplace personality assessment, and it said that I'm on a continuous self-improvement project. And that's sort of how I view it. I always try to be open to whatever opportunities come my way and see what I can fit in to learn about new things. And often it takes me in really different directions. But for now, it's kind of thinking about the next year. What am I going to do to, especially since I'm not working, what am I going to do to continue my licensure? Will there be a point when I want to return to XYZ part of the job? And I'm not thinking as far away as 5 and 10 years, because I just don't know what that's going to look like.
Jason had another question. He says, I can't resist. Lisa said, write it down. Do any of you write down your goals or keep a journal?
I mean, formally, yes, I do write it down. I think, okay, and this is just more me. One thing that, Ebony, you mentioned before, which is like, what is it that you're meant to be? I think that's such a big question, though, that it's not even like, for example, I am getting a certificate to be a yoga teacher, right? Which is completely different from what I'm doing right now. And that's, if you ask me what I'm meant to be, well, I want to be I don't know, a spiritual healer one day, right? So it's completely different from what I'm doing right now. I'm saying that because I do think that writing it down, but not so much in like a corporate way, but how do you see yourself, or reminding yourself of that endless potential that you have. And I do have those, let's call it mantras, or affirmations that I have in my office to remind myself of all the things that I'm capable of, because ultimately our brains are listening to what we say, right? So we have to remember that. And I do think it's important to have those affirmations around you.
So we are coming to the end of our time, but I just want to give you all a chance to your very specific industries, students who are wanting to go into your industries. If you have one tip that you could give them, please. One thing that I have learned at Earlham is to be comfortable with silence too. I think that moment of stillness, I think it goes with me everywhere. I'm okay with the silence.
Ebony, so the question is, if a student wants to go into the field that we're currently in, like what advice would, that's very interesting. Internships probably are a good way to break into tech and then insights, just because either that, or actually something even more concrete than that. I think if there are some technical skills that they don't have and they would like to break into, for example, being able to do SQL, which a lot of people in tech these days have to do, there are so many courses that they can take, right? So if you have that certification, and I think when you say SQL, it's just at first very intimidating, but it's actually pretty easy. So you could learn it in like a month, right? And so pick up those concrete skills that if like a job description has that, make sure that you have that somehow. And like, again, everything's in the art of how you present yourself in the resume and the skills, the hard like skills that you have on your resume. And if you don't have them, then take a course. It's so easy to do that these days.
Do you, as someone who looks at resumes in the hiring process, how important is the name of where they got those skills? Like, for example, students who, and anyone feel free to chime into this question. And if you need to leave, I understand that the conversation, I love where it's going. The students, they oftentimes are looking more at the name of the institution or where they got the certificate rather than what they actually got in the certificate. How important are those things to you?
That has, like, we don't, I mean, a little bit of value. I'm not going to say it doesn't, because sometimes the optics, yes, they play a role, but I would say that that is like 10% of what we look at. You know, the rest of it is really experience and the skills. And for the jobs that we usually have at LinkedIn, they have to do some sort of exercise, put a little presentation together, not to give the presentation, but to actually like send it. And that is actually the resume more than anything else, is how they're doing that exercise. So I wouldn't put too much weight on where that like certification is coming from.
Okay. That's great. Thank you.
I think one piece of advice that I would have is it's okay to be a generalist and gain confidence in that and the ability to tell that story. So if you're good at solving problems for people, or you're good at breaking apart a problem and creating action items from that, be able to talk about that in a way that is, around operations or around being a generalist. And I think that's becoming such a important skill set in whatever industry it is that you're going into, that it's important to be able to have confidence and talk about that as value.
Thank you. Thank you.
So for anybody who is potentially interested in midwifery, the first thing to know would be it's a lot more than just birth. If you have an interest in sexual health, reproductive health, counseling in general, actually, depending upon the job, birth can be a small or non-existent component of the position. I found my passion once I started working was actually in the sexual health counseling. The second one would be, there are more direct paths to midwifery than the one I took. Don't follow my path unless you want to work as an RN. So there are graduate entry programs into any advanced practice nursing degree. And if you come out of Earlham, you would apply directly to a master's in nursing in a direct entry program. And they'll get you the RN in the first year or two, and then get you the advanced practice degree. So if you knew where you wanted to end up, you could skip a few of the years that I needed to take to find my path, and save some money too.
Well, it is 8:06. So I'm going to take the time to wrap up, and I want to thank all of you who came and to our 3 interviewees for participating. The information was so great for me, especially in my role as a career coach, trying to, you know, support students as much as I can into getting into the path that they're meant to be in. So thank you so much for taking the time out to speak with me and to be a part of this interview. Really appreciate it.